TV shows and movies, and we read stories, read books, fascinated by the life of another. But this particular fascination with stop. There we go. This particular fascination, I think, with the life of the um, scribe of A Course in Miracles, um, is it's just so amazing, um, seeing and hearing these stories. So and then relating to them, like, oh my gosh, uh, now I can see what was happening at the time in their lives. Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. Just such an amazing, okay, make sure I got the right thing up here. All right. Such an amazing thing. So here we go, getting up live on the screen. And I'm looking for my bookmark. You probably know better where we are because you have a paper. Uh,
Well, without my pen and or physical bookmarks, I would be just as flipping around as anyone. So
there you go.
I have us in the middle of page 302, and we were going to back up a paragraph to what he was really saying.
Okay, let me go back here. Maybe I moved too
Oh,
far.
you had it.
Okay, okay. Right here?
A little past that, I think.
A little past that. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
the right
Okay.
column in your
Oh,
screen.
okay. There we go.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
see, just
59%. That's about two-thirds.
yeah, absolutely. So
Getting up there, close to it, maybe.
okay, so we are going to back up a paragraph. And do you want to read?
Sure.
Or
Sure.
I can read if you want me to.
Oh, no, I can read.
Okay.
That's
All
fine.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just back up to the within,
Yeah.
which is the top of the page of 302 in chapter 10 of Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by William, excuse me, by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. Must have been thinking of William Shepard. Anyway, uh, well, the next two paragraphs start with W, so maybe that's what it was. So
Exactly.
Ken begins with, within the world of separation, every person's mind contains both ways of seeing, the ego's guilt and attack, and the Holy Spirit's forgiveness and unity. Well, there's the whole course in a nutshell. So this is so often restated, huh? Also within this illusory world, Bill's perception of Helen, well, there's the William again, ensures that she is there as well. On the metaphysical level, on the other hand, A Course in Miracles teaches that no one is outside our minds at all, including all those aforementioned biographies we are just talking about.
Really, yep. They're all
Yeah.
in mine.
Hmm. So the channeled portion uh, begins. What he was really saying was that he would not look at you through his ego or perceive your ego in you. Stated positively, he would see you through the Holy Spirit in his mind and perceive it in yours. What you acknowledge in your brother, you are acknowledging in yourself. I think that sentence is a direct quote from the Course. What you share, you strengthen. And like goes to that one. The voice of the Holy Spirit is weak in you. That is why you must share it, because it must be increased in strength before you can hear it. It is impossible to hear it in yourself. While it is so weak in your own mind, it is not weak in itself, but it is limited by your unwillingness to hear it. Well, that paragraph is loaded, and I'm glad we read it again
Yeah.
because it was something I needed to hear again. I need to strengthen the willingness to listen to Holy Spirit's translation of everything into a forgiveness classroom instead of ego's mistranslation or misinterpretation into a call for attack and defense and reinforcing the sin, guilt, fear thought system of ego's deadly dream.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and what he's describing here is like a spiritual transformer.
Mm-hmm.
And and it works, it strengthens by repeating inside itself. And so uh as we share it, it's increased
Mhm.
because it is uh, given, it can grow to its full extent or fuller extent.
Mhm.
So it comes in at, I don't know, 2 volts and comes out at 12. I don't know.
Well, that's the amplification
Yeah,
of the Holy Spirit. Uh,
exactly.
and
Exactly.
if we're listening to Holy Spirit's voice, it amplifies the truth and attenuates the lie, and ego does the opposite.
Pretty darn amazing. Yeah.
Yep, yep.
And
It's like,
and
shall we
and that
not? Oh,
and
go
this
ahead.
is a principle that's throughout the course
Oh
that
yeah, oh yeah.
people, what, and people don't get that it works the opposite way too. That what we when we share weakness, it amplifies that as well, and that
Yeah.
becomes our experience. So it's by sharing the strength and the love of God, and the voice of the Holy Spirit, that it actually becomes stronger in us. So
Hmm.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, and when we seem to strengthen the ego, we're strengthening nothing. So
Yeah,
it's not like that we don't have an opportunity at every single instant of every single day to undo what we've seemed to have done with the ego, because it's an infinitely thin veneer of mistruth over the truth, right?
yeah.
I mean, there's really nothing to it. I mean, it's a
It's a
just
shadow.
it's a shadow. Yeah, it's I mean, a one little glimmer of light dispels the whole shadow. And that basically is saying, it doesn't require anything but a change in which thought system we're using at any nanosecond of our experience.
Absolutely. And that is all it requires.
Yeah,
Simple, small, but it seems like so much to us. Oh my God.
it does. It does. And we made it up to seem like this gargantuan, uh, you know, miles thick concrete and steel reinforced iron wall, impenetrable fortress kind of thing, with guard dogs and concertina wire and and, and nukes aimed at our heads, and all kinds of whatever you can muster up, with the ego mind. It seems to have created like an impossible fortress, the castle keep kind of thing, and yet um Holy Spirit can, metaphorically walk right through any wall that ego seems to muster, and you know tiptoe or waltz or whatever, right through the barriers that we think we've made in our mind, and say that was no big deal, because it is nothing. I mean, it really is nothing. But because our minds are so powerful, we can make the nothing seem like big deals and big somethings.
Yeah, yeah. And it reminds me, I'm thinking about this story in the Bible of David and Goliath. And Goliath was this big, giant guy who was in the Philistines. He was, every day the Israelites would send out a champion, and Goliath would beat that champion every time. And he's like, down there, you can't pass here, and so they girded up all their champions with all the armor and gave them all the weapons, and they would go out there, and every time this big Goliath would beat them, because they were girded up with all the paraphernalia, but they didn't have the strength, the courage, or the spirit in them to actually overcome the Goliath. But then David comes along, and he's a
Mhm.
little poet and a little
And
shepherd.
takes them out with a spit wad, right? Or
Yeah, exactly.
maybe it was a slingshot. Yeah.
Slingshot, yeah. And when he said, I'll go out there, and they were like, well, we got to put on all this armor, we got to give you all these weapons, and he's like, no, that's only going to weigh me down. I don't need that stuff. I'm going with what I have that I know will do it. Now, what they didn't realize, it probably is because David was a shepherd, and he fought off wolves for his sheep. He fought off, predators, bears, I don't know what. for his sheep with that slingshot, that same thing. So, when he said, I don't need all your weaponry and I don't need all your armor, they thought he was crazy and he was going to go out to die. But in reality, he went out there and, slew Goliath with a stone. And because he had the courage of conviction of the truth of what he was. And, that's a story that is, of course, it's a metaphor and of course, it's a myth, but the story itself is made to show us that the only thing you need is the Holy Spirit. And whatever seems to be attacking you um, can't overcome that power because it's all of God's creation in a nutshell there. So um, I love that.
Yeah,
So
what you just shared reminded me of one of Ken Wapnick's audios I just listened to last day or two. Um, and it's The Mind, a Giant Strength. I put a link in the chat there if you want to share it. It's an excellent program, and it's really talking about how, the power of our mind is unimaginable. But because we've used it to limit ourselves and to basically make a hellish dream, we're afraid of that strength. But if we turn this strength over to the Holy Spirit, which is basically saying all I have to do is, like you're talking about the amplification factor of if I just trust the principle that nothing happened and that we're all the same, and therefore kindness is appropriate in every situation, then I can afford to not condemn, which is to say, not to project my ego mind onto anything and everything. And the way we get to that is by looking at how much we want to do that, and just not you know creeping ourselves out with how initially noticing how much we do that, but just say, wow, I must be afraid of the love that's behind that um, desire to want to take the guilt in my mind that I can't stand and put it out onto everything and everyone in the world. But in truth, it's nothing. So the giant strength of the mind is really the willingness to not bully the world like a Goliath, but to have the strength to not be on the battleground at all, and just basically to be above it, which I think is kind of transcends the biblical metaphor a bit. But it just recognizes that if I'm on the battleground, I'm still thinking in terms of duality, and the course really is relatively unique in that regard, in that it says, in order to really escape from the battleground, we have to uh, be willing to look at it, the pain and the discomfort and the suffering that our dream of duality has caused us, and be willing to walk away from that instead of engaging every battle that we're invited to.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And another thing this just came to me as you were speaking, I was thinking about David and Goliath, and the problem with the other guys that went up against Goliath was they went up against him. They took their weapons and they went up to him, where David could do it from a distance. He didn't even have to be next to the guy. He could do it from, I don't know, 20 yards away or something. I don't know how
It
far.
was an old world drone strike, basically.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And he didn't even have to go onto the battleground. He just did his sling from a distance, and we don't have to go on the battleground either.
Mm-mm.
We just
Yeah.
have to carry the
The whole
strength.
idea of the premise of duality is really, it's such a rare thing to find in religion, and even in metaphysical systems of, the pure non-duality that eliminates the need for wanting to do battle in the world. And it doesn't mean that we're not physically involved in things that appear to be fights, but it just means that we don't take them seriously. And if I don't take them seriously, I'm withdrawing my identity from the thought system of conflict. And that's, I think, what the course is asking us to consider. Could that be really what I want? Maybe so.
Maybe so.
Should I finish that paragraph or that?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So It continues, will itself is an idea and is therefore strengthened by being shared. You have made the mistake of looking for the Holy Spirit in yourself, little s implied there, and that is why your meditations have frightened you. By adopting the ego's viewpoint, you undertook an ego alien journey with the ego as guide. This was bound to produce fear. Bill's better idea needs to be strengthened in both of you. Since it was his, he can increase it by giving it to you. I suggest that he might care to talk to you about it and perhaps even let you take notes for him. He has much to teach through the Holy Spirit, and this might be a very good way to begin.
Wow.
You want to read on?
Yeah, and I love the idea that Helen take notes for Bill.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and if what comes to mind to generalize it, as I'll try to do to not make it about special people, it's like if I can realize that you have something to teach me, I have something to teach you, and everyone has something to help each other, then I'm aligning with the sameness and the idea of extension rather than um, you know to have give all to all. And I think that's the premise that everyone is infinitely loving and loved and lovable in truth. And if I can remember that, then there's no deficiency in anyone, and everyone has everything, and then therefore can give everyone everything. Even though we seem to have unique contributions on this level, it's really all part of the same being, right?
It is, and any fear that we have, and there's a lot of fear going on in the world right now because of political systems and religious systems and social systems and health, illnesses and all that kind of stuff. A lot of stuff going on in the world that would say to us that we are vulnerable and that we need to be careful or we need to do something. But that is the ego alien journey that we think we're on. And
Hmm.
it's bound to produce fear. It can't help but produce fear because we're looking outside of ourselves for our safety. We're looking outside of ourselves for our health. We're looking outside of ourselves for our spiritual connection. And there's nothing outside. It is, absolutely, uh, it's an inside job,
Hmm.
complete total.
Yep.
Uh, so Ken continues, slightly later, this about Helen is in a passage we shall return to in part 3 when we consider her in more detail, in particular, her need to keep herself separate from others. All right, so then this is Jesus talking to Helen about this. You must have noticed how often I have used your own ideas to help you. Bill is right in saying that you have learned to be a loving, wise, and very understanding therapist, except for yourself. That exception has given you more than perception for others because, let's see, that exception has given you more than perception for others because of what you saw in them, but less than knowledge of your real relationships to them because you did not make them part of you. Understanding is beyond perception because it introduces meaning, but it is below knowledge, even though it can grow towards it. It is possible with great effort to understand someone else and to be helpful to him, but the effort is misdirected. The misdirection is quite apparent. It is directed away from you. That then this is huge. I mean, Jesus is saying, all of your efforts, fine as they are outward, and it's a misdirection. So he continues, this does not mean that it is lost to you, but it does mean that you are not aware of it. I have saved all your, and this is actually in the course, I read this many times. I have saved all of your kindnesses and every loving thought you have had, and I assure you that you have had many. I have purified them of errors which hid their light, and have kept them for you in their own perfect radiance. They are beyond destruction and beyond guilt. They came from the Holy Spirit within you, and we know that what God creates is eternal. And then Ken says most of this last paragraph was later joined with another message meant for Helen and placed together in what is now a very moving passage that comes at the end of Teaching and Healing in chapter 5.
Hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
in fact, that was something we, in a Wednesday group that I started in 2007, used to read pretty much every Wednesday evening as a closing meditation on page 83 of the text. Yeah, yeah, very
yeah,
inspiring, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, because
it is.
how could we really lose any part of the truth of ourselves? So, every loving thought, every kindness hasn't been lost. Every inspired idea still is completely intact. If it's eternal, it's true, and if it's true, it means it is beyond destruction, right?
That's right. And it is a part of creation.
Hmm. Hmm.
We're reading about what is creation now. And,
I think.
creation. Go ahead.
Oh, I think the challenge is that we try to use egos. Go along with ego's propaganda of thinking, well, there's some things that are ephemeral that might fit. I made a pretty good pie today, or I got 17 things checked off my to-do list, or it's like, well, it's not about that. It's about the recognition of any time that we see everyone and anyone as the same, and really undo the belief in separation and how whatever forms those happen to take. So it can't be anything that's specific, but it's the what's eternally true about the specific things that's saved, if that makes sense. At least
Yeah.
that's kind of how I read that anyway.
Well, yeah, because it's all the love and kindnesses, all the kindness in every loving thought.
Hmm.
So, he's very clearly not saying that it's an app, it's a thing or an action.
Hmm.
Um, it's the thoughts that are being held for us and kept for
Yeah.
us because
It's
they're love.
yeah, it's the content of the mind, the ideas and the thoughts, but not the behaviors and the the symbols and the forms. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
So, and yeah, I'd like to have some of that pie you made. So, anyway. So Ken says, Jesus now returns to his psychological contrast of Helen and Bill. This obviously was a form of teaching both astute clinical psychologists, could relate to with a minimal amount of resistance. So he's talking to them on their own terms, right? Bill, okay, this is Jesus speaking. Bill once spoke of the kingdom in his way because he yearns for what he has repressed. You are much more afraid of it because dissociation is more fearful. Bill's better contact has allowed him the strength to retain the fear in awareness and to resort to displacement, which he is learning to overcome with your help. That is because you do not perceive him as dissociated and can help him with his repression, which does not frighten you. Wow. He, on the other hand, has no difficulty in seeing you dissociate and does not have to deal with repression in you, which would produce fear in him. So he's really talking about their relationship and how they help each other. But uh, Bill is not afraid of Helen because of her strength, but Helen uh, uh, she sees Bill as being strong too, and she doesn't perceive him as being dissociated. And so she can help him. And so that's really what Jesus is asking us to do as well. Don't perceive the uh, the dissociation, the weakness, the fear, the smallness, the upset, the anger, whatever that person is going through. Um, you know, if we look beyond that to the truth of what they are, we can truly help them. But if we think that they are, uh, they're that what we perceive in them the weakness, the smallness, the fear, if we perceive that as being true and real about them, then we can't help but be afraid because we're seeing it in them, we see it in ourselves. So and it is all about how we see each other. This is this is also a recurrent theme in the course. See your brother as the Christ, and perceive him as what something that's real, not as something that is uh, something that can or should or would actually cause you any fear.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking, that I'm going to paraphrase something that's else from the course. Is like if we're trusting in our ego identity, we have every reason to be fearful, right? And because if I'm projecting uh the split mind that I think I've achieved onto you or anyone else, uh there's no peace in that whatsoever. That's makes peace impossible, because peace really is the elimination of the belief in separation. And the only way to eliminate it is to look at it and decide that we don't want it. And um, not and just basically say no to that identity. And it's not about saying no to the form, because that doesn't really do anything, um, any more than throwing Rotten Tomatoes at a screen in a movie theater takes care of what's coming through the projector. But darned if we don't try at times. It's like, we'll repair the dream. But
That's it.
yeah. So anyway,
There's no repair for something that is not broken.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. How can a dream need repair? But we keep trying, don't we? I mean, in different ways. We've basically invested and put our faith in illusion. And how can an illusion ever satisfy us, let alone give us any real comfort or solace or true strength, true 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 protection against insanity?
Yeah, it absolutely cannot.
Yeah,
So yeah, very interesting. So let's see. So let's see. You want me to continue reading?
sure.
Okay. Joining the atonement. This is Jesus still talking to Helen. Joining the atonement, which I have repeatedly asked you to do, is always a way out of fear. This does not mean that you can safely fail to acknowledge anything that is true, but the Holy Spirit will not fail to help you reinterpret everything that you perceive as fearful and teach you only what is loving and true. It is beyond your ability to destroy, but entirely within your grasp. It belongs to you because you created it. It belongs to you because you created it. It is yours because it is a part of you, just as you are part of God because He created you. And he's actually saying that, all these things that we are afraid of in the world, we made them up. We made we made up the story saying this is what's going to scare me, and now, oh God, I'm scared. Yeah, funny how that works.
We're terrified of our shadows, and yet, guess who's casting them?
Yeah. But if you've seen little children or I think I saw something the other day of like a dog that was seeing its shadow, and it was scared of it. It was like, freaking out every time every time it saw its shadow. Of course, you can't explain that to a dog, that that's not real, that's it's just, it's nothing. But we are the same thing, same way. You can't explain to us that, it's nothing
Hmm.
because we're in our minds thinking it's something. And every time we see it, we want to run away from it. But you can't run away from your shadow. It doesn't work that way. All you have to do is step into the light,
Hmm.
uh,
Or turn toward the light,
or
and
turn toward the light.
and
Yeah,
then the shadow disappears.
exactly. And in the direct sun of the noonday, there is no shadow because it's directly over you. But anytime the light's on either side is going to cast a shadow. I guess you get a shadow on the bottom anyway. So
Just a quick aside. I remember when we went to Oaxaca, Mexico, we went to this feast festival called the Guelaguetza, and in this open air amphitheater, and they have I think like 15 or 16, um, native groups from different parts of Mexico all converge there for this celebration every year. And it's, the big one of the big highlights of that community. And I happened to look down on the bleachers I was sitting in and realized I didn't see my shadow. And I realized, oh, I've been living in a northern latitude long enough that I never really had that experience before of when the sun was truly directly overhead, not at an angle. The shadows disappear. But it's like, oh yeah, I guess there are certain latitudes where you're always going to see some kind of shadow, but at midday. But just because of the way the geometry of sunlight hits the earth and depending on what
right,
latitude you're on and what time of year and so forth. But anyway, it was just kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
yeah, and
A
it's
little trivia kind of thing, but then you could you know sh show geometrically where in the world you can at the stroke of true solar noon your shadow would disappear. But, yeah.
yeah,
At least if you were like a cylinder, say.
it
A little
is
bit hypothetical. Okay.
a cylinder. Uh,
Yeah.
and isn't it? I mean, isn't that was it? I hate to be so ignorant, but wasn't it Pythagoras that proved that the Earth was round by the shadows?
There actually was in the book Secrets of the Great Pyramid, there was another Greek philosopher, mathematician. I don't think it was Pythagoras though, who showed that he used it to measure the distance with the assumption that the Earth was curved, and showed the distance between I think it was like the Great Pyramid and some other, something nearby and something far away and in Greece, I think it was. And um, by, measuring the length of the shadows at certain specific dates in the year kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and he was able to calculate the circumference of the Earth by it.
Right, right.
Which
Yeah.
I mean that those early mathematicians just they got to blow your mind because they figured it out. It wasn't like it was yeah, pretty interesting. Anyway, back to the book.
Right.
Okay, so Jesus still talking to Helen.
The bigger sphere.
The bigger sphere, yeah. Joining the atonement, which I have repeatedly asked you to do, is always a way out of fear. This does not mean that you can safely fail to acknowledge anything that is true, but the Holy Spirit will not fail to help you reinterpret, I love that, everything you perceive as fearful and teach you only what is loving is true. It is beyond your ability to destroy, but entirely within your grasp. It belongs to you because you created it. It is yours because it is part of you, just as you are part of God because He created you. And so there's that
Cuckoo,
parallel.
and we're all pure
Exactly.
novel, all inclusive, undifferentiated unity that is our real identity. Yeah. It
Yeah,
only seems to be problematic when we seem to be able to fragment it.
exactly. And fragmentation is impossible. So,
Mhm.
do you want to read?
Sure.
Okay.
And later a passage for Bill, again urging him to join, this time with himself as well as with Helen, this being the way of his joining with Jesus. This, thus Bill, in parentheses, and all of us, is being taught that it is not possible to join with one without the other, since in reality we are all part of the one Christ. Separating from one aspect of the sonship separates from all. Likewise, truly joining with one without illusions joins with all. In truth, we are, as we shall see below, both totally unified within our capital S self, as well as unified with all of Christ, both one and at one. That's in quotes. So yeah, again, the more reiterations of the pure non-dual metaphysics of the Course.
Yeah. And, there are people that say the Course is not non-dual. And I think they're misinterpreting what non-dual means. But um,
Well, the Course is written in dualistic language because it meets us where we're at. But if you can read and listen more deeply to what it's saying, as Ken points out, another group we've just listened to the 8-part series that Ken did on YouTube on the melos, with the music and the meaning and really deeply listening to what's behind the words rather than the form of the words. And in the same way that if you listen to what's behind the music rather than just you know analyzing the notes, you kind of miss the message. The message is, like Ken says, it's like an epic poem, and the epic uh, poem of the Course is really the the sweeping symphonic message that heralds an awakening in our mind of a peace that we can't even fathom when we're identified with a separate self. And that's why, it takes a long time typically to allow that message to seep in, and almost like through osmosis, with enough repetition, it starts to gain strength in our mind as to, the deeper meaning as we generalize the message.
exactly. And it's impossible for us to do that without with because we are in a dualistic mind.
Hmm.
We have to have something that can that we can see that that shows us the truth. Uh, and if you were just doing total non-dually, the whole course would just say God is, and there'd be no the story or comparison or examples or anything to help you. So it has to give you these things because your dualistic mind has to have something to latch onto and give it the understanding.
Hmm.
So yeah. Okay, I'll let you continue.
Okay. Let's see, where were we? Okay. So
There is
there's,
none.
yeah, there's time for delay, but there need not be. God weeps at the sacrifice of his children who believe they are lost to him. Well, I'm going to pause right there just to mention. Okay, there's another perfect example of where one could think this is a dualistic course because it's talking about God weeping, plus tear ducts, and and a body, and and if it weren't, we'd all be in big trouble. He, quote, one more thing, unquote, that Bill learned. I thought that was uh, I thought that was Steve Jobs that said that. The one more thing that Bill must learn is merely that he is not the one more. He is both one and at one. And I think the implication is we're all both one and at one. He will learn this now. There's a lot of italicized words in what we're reading today, aren't there?
Yeah, there are.
If he will learn that this now, he will be willing in accord with the last judgment, which is really the only the biblical reminder of the inevitability of self-inclusion. That is what physician heal thyself really means. Bill has frequently observed this for himself, that this is hard to do. He has, however, been perfectly aware of just what you should do about it. Hopefully all the emphasis on the syllables and the words that were in italics came across. Yes.
Yeah,
But yeah, what a great reminder. It's like, you know, the healing ourself is really just healing our fragmented identity and our split minds by bringing everyone back in that we've condemned in whatever way that seems to make, the most trivial of things, which is everything in form, really, a big deal, and has completely overlooked the infinitely important innocence of our real identity that we all share. So, so
Exactly.
I'll read one more paragraph. You might ask him for me. Did I read that one?
No, you didn't.
Okay. You might ask him for me whether he does not think he might be dissociating himself from his own awareness, since he is so clear about the remedy for you. You might also remind him that to whatever extent he separates himself from you, he is separating himself from me. This is a collaborative venture. I think that phrase appears in the course, that healing is atonement, and in any other synonym you can throw at salvation, resurrection. There's a whole bunch of words in the course that eventually resolve to the same idea, right? So this is a collaborative venture. Let me therefore return his own ideas to him so that you can share them and thus help each other to help me. So, and that's all what we're doing is we're helping each other help the Christ mind in all of us and awaken ourselves to the unchanging peace and the completely stable tranquility that we've always wanted, that we, if we're honest with ourselves, have never found in the world and never will find in the world because we made it up to be a place of war.
Exactly. And the thing is, this is a very clear message to all of us, that it's only through helping each other uh, that we can find it ourselves. And I don't know for sure, this is true, but I really think that you can't just do it alone. You have to
Right.
that relationship with another and be, you know, that their interest is as important as your interest, that they can learn just like you can learn, that my brother and I are not different. That is one of the biggest tenets of the course,
Hmm.
this idea of equality,
Yep.
and that everyone has to be included. There
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
be, you can't let anyone out.
Hmm.
That everyone has to be included.
Right. Right.
And
And we have our sacred cows and our sheep and goats, classifications and categories that are always constantly shifting because every once in a while you'll see, you'll get to know someone and you say, oh, they're actually pretty cool. I thought they were, maybe, mediocre or not so great, or, have some kind of judgment against them. And then you realize, oh, well, maybe I stand or sit corrected, as the case may be. But I was thinking about that, nothing so blinding as perception of form. Well, if the form is what shouts differences are real, everything and everyone is, like this, we tend to glorify snowflakes because they're all unique and different. Well, yeah, and so what? Does that if we can use that as a principle to say, underlying the form, there is a principle set of principles or a sense of ideas that makes them the same. um, there's nothing wrong with uh, appreciating the diversity and individuality within the dream, and uh, being respectful of that without making that a big deal. I think maybe that's one way to look at it.
yeah,
Is if I can just say, yeah, well, I honor every unique aspect of creation, but what really allows me to honor that is not making a big deal about the differences. It's really the only way that can really have a true respect and a true uh, acceptance is to have an appreciation for the sameness, that we really are all part of the same creation, and have the same three-part mind, and the same ego, the same Holy Spirit, and the same decision maker, as Ken points out so many places.
yeah. And it's the thing is with the snowflake, just like the thing with us. Snowflake, it's all water. It's all water,
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
or or
Perfect.
hydrogen dioxide or dihydrogen oxide or hydroxyic acid or any of the things
I
you.
haven't heard those labels before, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that's water. It's an acid, it's
Hmm.
a base, it's everything. It's all the
It's
same.
a dessert topping and a floor wax. You're both
That's
right.
right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well,
That was a
but
funny skit I saw years ago
yeah,
on
that
TV.
sounds pretty dang funny.
Yeah.
I love it. So yeah, let's see, where are we at here? So you want me to read? Let's see.
Sure.
Okay. Shortly afterwards, Helen wrote about herself along with Jesus's correction. Helen, I asked the Holy Spirit in me to listen in case our brother, Jesus, wanted to share some of his thoughts with me, and I would be honored if he wanted to. The answer was that it was not a good beginning because he always wants to share his. Uh, it's like, oh yeah, okay. I made the wrong judgment of my brother Jesus because, I thought, oh, this is a special deal that he's going to give to me or a special thing or whatever, and I'm going to just invite him because, I appreciate that, and he's saying, you know what, there's nothing special about it. Get
Hmm.
over it.
And it's not in an intermittent it's source of inspiration.
Yeah,
It's not like, well, one day, Holy Spirit's going to dry up and leave us stranded somewhere. No, it's like that is completely reliable because that's our real identity. And the only thing that's completely unreliable, which we haven't really firmly convinced ourselves of yet, is the ego.
that's right. But I don't know how we're not convinced of it because it's so obvious. It happens over and over and over.
Right.
Only every time. There's there's not a single time
Hmm.
that the ego actually lives up to any expectation that we have,
Hmm.
uh, because it can't.
Right.
And,
Right.
that reminds me of our political situation. For some reason we keep thinking, oh, we're gonna, this guy's gonna fix it, or this government's gonna fix it, or this thing is. No, they're not.
It's as you're saying that because I've reflected quite a bit in the last week and a half about the election, and that the first words I heard Ken say a week ago Wednesday when I was out for a morning walk was, "I've put my faith in illusion," and I was thinking, well, yeah, that certainly applies, and it's not just an every 4 year kind of thing. It's 24/7. Because again, like that blog post I did on ACIM blog a couple of weeks ago. It's like, and I just keep needing to remind myself, it's like I'm always voting. Everyone is always voting for either ego or Holy Spirit, for insanity or sanity, for a prison or a classroom. I've got a little chart on my wall that that has a variation of Ken's chart, and I've got. I'll just read the little list on the ego side: separation, nightmare, sickness, differences, discomfort, duality, denial, death, wishes, condemnation, um, upset, sin, guilt, fear, attack, anger, and grievances, and and projection makes perception, which leads to the prison, right? And on the Holy Spirit side is open-mindedness, gentleness, generosity, kindness, vision, peace, healing, sameness, true comfort, the happy dreamer, a denial of ego's denial, shared interest, willingness, patience, trust, welcome, correction, and laughter. So, and then its whole emphasis is going the other direction. Instead of from from content to form, it takes us from form back to the content on our mind, which is the all-inclusive forgiveness includes me. So that's on the graphic on my wall.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And then above the line is the truth, the pure non-duality of God's unchanging will, limitless creation already done. And that's what we're getting back to by using that blue dot, the tiny the decision maker that takes us back to the tiny mad idea and says, nah, maybe not. I'll try Holy Spirit's correction instead of ego's uh, insanity for a while.
Yes. And understanding that uh, it never changes.
Hmm.
What God is never changes, never has changed, never can change, never will change, impossible. So this is really what he's saying here. I'm always here like this. I'm always showing up here for you, just like this.
Yep.
And if you think, I'm going to not show up for you at some point, then, you're seeing things it's not a good beginning because I'm always here.
Yeah. Well, that Holy Spirit, aka inner kindness teacher, aka Jesus of the Course, is completely trustworthy. And when we align ourselves with that, we become completely trustworthy. So
Yeah. And
it's a good example.
it is a good example. Absolutely. And we could be, um, you know, happy right now if we just
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
So, so Ken says, in other words, Jesus's love does not. Someone was detected at your front door. Oh, Sandy going outside. In other words, Jesus's love does not come and go. His loving thoughts are always present in our minds, patiently awaiting our welcoming of them. We are the ones who leave him, thereby making his love appear inconsistent, a projection of our own inconsistent love. Our separation from these thoughts is therefore our responsibility. And so we are the ones who need to return to their constant presence. And again, this is the responsibility for sight that,
Mhm.
that is so clear in the course. It's what I choose to see, what I'm looking at. And, I can see the truth. And the truth is that love is always here, love is always consistent, love never changes. Uh, and we're the ones who uh, decide that that might not be true because why? Someone's at my door. Why? Because um, I don't trust my brother. I don't trust the world. I don't trust God. And so I think that they're going to let me down. And uh, and until I can literally trust my brother who's one with me, trust God who is always here, trust the Holy Spirit who is always here, trust my own true self, which has never changed, then I can trust everything and I have nothing to fear. But as long as I'm all being all wishy-washy, willy-nilly here, willy and nilly, I think that was a singing group back in the, anyway,
Or was that Milli Vanilli?
yeah. Oh yeah, Willy, Milly, Vanilli. Uh,
Sounds kind of silly. Really.
sounds silly. Oh my gosh.
Or maybe I'm just being a hillbilly. Um, yeah, I was just going to add to what you were saying is that that this paragraph reminds me of something that a lady in our Wednesday night course study group shared, oh, probably at least a decade ago, that stuck with me. Is like, um, if God seems far away, guess who moved?
That's right.
I
That's
really like that little cliche.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's absolutely it. Okay, so we have about 5 more minutes. I don't know if you need to leave early or
Nope,
anything.
nope. I can.
Let's see.
Bottom of the hour works good. Yeah.
All right. So in a message for Helen and Bill in the context of what is now the introduction to chapter 6 in the text, Jesus explains how he can use, on behalf of the atonement, the mind's power that had been once directed toward the ego. And so this is Jesus explaining this in a beautiful way.
That's the giant strength again, right?
Exactly.
The giant strength of a mind,
The giant,
used to not to terrorize, but to uh, release from bondage.
exactly, exactly. And it's a terrible thing to waste.
Yeah, I remember that commercial.
You remember that. This is your brain. This is your brain on in its scrambled eggs. Uh,
Right.
okay,
This is your
so
brain on ego.
let's see. He says, you have been chosen to teach the atonement precisely because you have been extreme examples of allegiance to your thought systems and therefore have developed the capacity for allegiance. It has indeed been misplaced. Bill had become an outstanding example of allegiance to apathy, and you have become a startling example of fidelity to variability. But this
Isn't
You
that an oxymoron? That fidelity to variability? That's about as much of an oxymoron as you can get.
Oh my God, Jesus just has me cracking up over here every single time. He is the talk about your stand-up comedian. Anyway, that I
Uh-huh.
think, and he had to have been hilarious in his lifetime here
Well,
in
there's
the
so much
world.
humor in the course. I mean, maybe you recall it in
Oh yeah,
Estes Park. I did a whole 75-minute session on the humor in the course because there's a lot in there if you're looking for it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So let's see, where are we at? Okay. So Bill had become an outstanding example of allegiance to apathy, and you have become a startling example of fidelity to variability. But this is a form of faith, which you yourselves have grown willing to redirect. You cannot doubt the strength of your devotion when you consider how faithfully you observed it. It was quite evident that you had already developed the ability to follow a better model if you could accept it. And so, yeah, he's talking about the strength of, if you were able to believe this crap and have it, change your life and, do all these different things, then, look what's going to happen when you have the truth. It's going to be a completely, talk about uh, no brainer here. It absolutely is going to be a no brainer. But if you think that somehow or the other uh, you don't have the capacity for it, Jesus is really clear. And, I see myself when he's saying that I do have an allegiance to variability. I do expect things to shift and change. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of
Evil.
yeah,
On that note, I'm due of
whoa,
our uh,
are really
next
breaking up.
conversation.
Thank you so much, Bruce Rawls. And I'm so, so very
Right, John?
grateful for you. And
Mutual.
all right. And I'm going to stop the share. And let's see, not report this, but just submit it. Uh, oh no. Anyway,